Hello and welcome to Lost Love Chronicles.
Dear listeners, before we get started, drop a quick hi in the comments and let us know where you're tuning in from. Now let's start with the story. My name is Reed Barrett. I'm 34 years old, and until recently, I was a middle manager for an engineering firm that specialized in designing and building machinery for various clients. It wasn't a bad job, I liked the work well enough, but I always knew there was a ceiling I'd never break through. It was a family-run operation, and no matter how much effort I put in, I was never going to be one of them. That became clearer with time. I kept showing up, working hard, doing what I was supposed to do, but the atmosphere shifted. Looking back now, I realized that certain events made my position there untenable. It wasn't just the job, it was my life unraveling all around me. And yet, I'd always been told I was one of the good ones. A decent guy. Someone who took things seriously, especially marriage. I used to laugh more. I used to be easier to be around. I guess a part of me still hopes I am. I've always been a hard worker. I provide. I help when people need it. I try to do what's right. That's how I was raised. I had to work for what I wanted. I wasn't the top of my class in high school, but I was consistently above average. I didn't coast on raw talent, I worked for my grades. I studied hard, put the time in. Got into a few fights, sure, but only when someone pushed me too far. I never held grudges. Things settled down afterwards. I've still got a close circle of male friends who've had my back through thick and thin. They were the ones who encouraged me when things got tough, reminded me who I was when I started to forget. No, I wasn't some Adonis. Girls didn't throw themselves at me, but I got along well with people. I listened. I treated women with respect. When a woman told me no, I took it as a no. That was it. That's just how I was brought up. I never did finish high school. Instead, I enrolled in a day-release apprentice program through a community college while studying engineering. I worked during the day at the corporation and attended classes on the side. It suited me. Really, I've always liked building things. It started with Duplo, then Lego, and later Meccano. As I got older, I graduated to real machines. Now, it's all CAD software and automation, but I still love it. My friends tease me and say I just like my toys. Maybe they're right. I'm always on the lookout for a new device or a clever piece of tech. That night, I was wearing a body cam. Nothing conspicuous, it looked like a badge. I thought I'd capture a fun night out with friends, something to look back on later. I didn't know at the time how important that footage would turn out to be, but I'm getting ahead of myself. It was near the end of my first year of college, and we were all ready to blow off some steam. Exams were done, and we had a few months of freedom ahead. My mate Bill had his eye on a girl from the nursing group. She was doing her placement through the local hospital and the college. He was nervous, jittery even, pacing a bit. "Come on, Reed," he said, elbowing me in the ribs. "You've got to come to this party. I've got my eye on one of the nurses, but I'll never get anywhere if I show up alone. I need backup." "Backup?" I laughed. "You mean you want me to distract her friends so you can make your move?" "Exactly," he grinned. "You're an engineer, mate. They'll be impressed. Brains and a trade. What more could they want?" "I don't know, Bill," I said, half smiling. "Don't nurses usually go for doctors?" I've always been of regular height, nothing that stood out in a crowd, but years of physical work at the firm had sculpted me into someone fit, strong, and confident in my movements. It wasn't something I consciously worked toward, it just came with the job. You spend years lifting heavy components and working on your feet, and the body adapts. I guess that made a difference when I went out that night. It was a live music night. Bill had convinced me to come along, and I figured, why not? I could use a break. Stephanie, one of Bill's friends from college, was already there and introduced us to a group of women. She knew nursing students mostly, I think. I did my best to be polite, complimented each of them. Nothing sleazy, just genuine. They were all attractive, and it felt right to acknowledge that. Then something happened that caught me completely off guard. One of them, Clara, started talking to me. I thought maybe she was just being polite. But the conversation kept going. We talked, laughed, had a few drinks. We even danced. Now, I'm not the most coordinated bloke on a dance floor. I can follow a rhythm, but don't ask me to lead. Still, she stayed close. Her legs, in particular, I remember thinking how graceful she was, even as I stumbled around trying to keep pace. But she laughed. She really laughed, like I'd actually said something clever, not just ridiculous. My jokes, some of them wildly inappropriate in the right light, seemed to land. Clara was maybe 5 feet 5 inches, slim, elegant without being flashy. She had a way of looking at you that made you feel like the only person in the room. I was stunned when, near the end of the evening, she leaned in and said, "Would you want to meet up again?" I just blinked. "You mean, like a date?" "Like a date," she said, smiling. I nodded. "Absolutely. I'd be an idiot to say no." Turned out, I was an idiot, but that came later. In the weeks that followed, we started seeing each other regularly. At first, it was like coffee, dinners, text messages that turned into long late-night calls. But the more time I spent with her, the more I realized how deeply she'd gotten into me. I'd had feelings before, sure, some girls I liked, even thought about seriously, but this was different. Clara left me breathless just by walking into a room. When she wasn't with me, I actually missed her. I felt it in my chest. My parents noticed. They used to tease me, but never harshly. My mom would grin and say, "Reed, you're glowing like you've won the lottery." And in a way, I had. They liked Clara right from the start. She made me happy, and they could see it. I started working even harder at school, at work, because I wanted her to see that I had potential, that I could be someone worthy of respect, someone she could love. We'd talk for hours about our future. Clara wanted to become a registered nurse, but she believed she couldn't have children. I didn't let that shake me. I love kids, I told her once, while we sat on the sofa, her legs curled beneath her. But not having them wouldn't change how I feel about you. I don't want to hold you back, she said. I know family matters to you. You wouldn't be holding me back, I said. And besides, maybe it's not a barrier. You'd make an amazing nurse with or without kids. And if we do end up having them, that only makes you better at what you do. We went over it again and again. She needed time to feel secure in her choice. Eventually, she made up her mind. I also spoke to my parents about it. They told me, follow your heart, Reed. That's all that matters. My mother adored Clara, said she was like the daughter she never had. My brother Dan already had one child and another on the way, so the pressure was off there. No one in the family was pushing anything. Clara was close with her sister, Camille. After working her night shifts, Clara sometimes had blocks of 5 to 7 days off, 2 or 3 times a year. She'd visit Camille's place. It was a couple of hours away. She always reassured me, "You're working so much, Reed, you won't even miss me." But I did miss her. Every single time. Eventually, she gave me an ultimatum: no children. That would have crushed someone else. But I agreed. I loved her, and that was enough. We got married about 3 years after we met on June 16th, 2022. It was a sunny day, almost too perfect. Bill stood beside me as my best man. Stephanie served as my lead bridesmaid. By the time Clara and I were married, Bill and Stephanie were no longer a couple. Stephanie had made it clear she was looking to marry a doctor. Bill, ever the good sport, used to rib her about that all the time. "So, Steph," he'd say with that sarcastic grin of his, "still got your heart set on a stethoscope and a 6-figure salary?" She'd roll her eyes. "You never did take anything seriously, Bill." He'd laugh and shrug. "Exactly why you left me, right?" Honestly, if you'd asked me back then, I would have agreed with him. It seemed inevitable. Clara, on the other hand, looked breathtaking that day. She walked down the aisle in this stunning ivory satin gown, the kind that seemed to shimmer with every step. I couldn't take my eyes off her. She was grinning the entire way down, and I really tried to hold her gaze and not look nervous or awkward. I think I must have had a ridiculous smirk on my face because later my cousin nudged me and said, "Mate, you looked like you were either in love or up to something." Clara moved into my house after the wedding. She'd always been firm about that no cohabitating before marriage. Tradition, she'd say. Let's at least try to do one thing the old-fashioned way. I respected that. When I'd first saved up enough money for a mortgage, I bought the house from my grandparents. It wasn't in great shape cheap, really, but it had good bones. I'd spent years fixing it up. I'm decent with tools, and by the time we got married, I had finished most of the major renovations. Sure, there were still things to modernize, but the place had character, and it felt like ours. Then came the discussion, argument, really about our finances. "I don't want to feel like I'm asking you for permission to buy a blouse or a gift for Camille," Clara said one night, arms folded across her chest. "It's not about hiding anything. I just want autonomy." "I get that," I said, "but isn't marriage about sharing?" She tilted her head. "Which is why we'll have a joint account for shared expenses. You keep yours, I keep mine, and we both contribute proportionally. Fair, right?" I didn't win that one. But in hindsight, it made sense. The first few years were smooth, even if not perfect. Clara's nursing class held reunions regularly every 6 months, sometimes yearly, and I managed to attend most of them. A couple I missed due to work trips. I'll be honest, I often felt like the spare tire at those things. The girls were nice enough, but I wasn't part of their world. I cracked a few jokes, tried to fit in, but I was clearly there as Clara's plus one, not someone they'd invite on my own merit. Stephanie was always kind to me, though. Maybe because she was Clara's best friend, or maybe because she knew I felt out of place. She'd make sure I was included in conversation or pull me into group photos. I appreciated that more than she probably knew. Clara would try to stay close to me during those events, but she also danced with a few of the doctors who showed up. I didn't mind. It wasn't romantic, just dancing. Besides, I ended up getting along pretty well with a few of the husbands. We found common ground in golf. That was my outlet. I managed to cut my handicap down to 6, which was something I was quietly proud of. Eventually, they persuaded me to start competing again, small club matches, mostly. Some of the golf trips lined up with their reunions, which worked out fine. I'd be out on the course while Clara was catching up with her old classmates. But then there were the visits to Camille's house. Clara kept going, a few times a year, always after a string of night shifts. She'd be gone 5, 6, sometimes 7 days. I understood she needed her space, time with her sister, but it still bugged me. "You don't even notice when I'm gone," she'd tease once. "That's not true," I replied. "The house is too quiet. Even the dog mopes." She'd just laugh and say, "You're working so hard. I doubt you have time to mope." The truth? I missed her more than I let on. Clara rarely talked about her work or her long-term plans. When I tried to ask where she saw herself in 5, 10 years, she'd shake her head. "I don't want a promotion," she said flatly one evening over dinner. "It's all admin. No patient interaction. I didn't become a nurse to sit behind a desk." "You'd be great at it, though. You've got the people skills, the focus." "I'm happy where I am, Reed. Not everyone wants to climb a ladder." I let it go after that. I figured it wasn't my place to push. Over time, our social life started to revolve less around us and more, primarily around her friends. I still went out with Bill and a few of the others now and then, mostly just to a nearby club for drinks. Nothing wild. Clara sometimes came along, though not always. When she did, she was always bright-eyed and full of energy, happy to be around the group. She used to joke, "It's good to see how the non-medical folk let loose." The nurses she worked with were usually allowed to invite others' partners, friends, even co-workers from outside the hospital for certain shifts that ended in organized parties. There'd be food, dancing, and cabs arranged at the end of the night. It was relaxed, fun. We weren't a wild crowd, but we knew how to enjoy ourselves. When we had free weekends, we'd head out of town. Sometimes it was hill walks, just the two of us, hands clasped, enjoying the quiet. Other times, we'd make a weekend trip to Glasgow or Edinburgh, catch a play, stay at a little inn, maybe indulge in a nice dinner. I always liked how Clara looked at city lights like they held secrets only she knew. We took vacations to coastal spots, two places with soft beaches and nearby historical sites or quirky local attractions. Clara's bikinis were always modest. High-waisted, full coverage, nothing too showy. I teased her once, holding up a more daring one in a shop. "What about this?" I asked, dangling it in front of her. She laughed and shook her head. "That's not happening. I'd rather not spend the entire holiday pulling at fabric." And as for those beaches where clothing was optional, she just rolled her eyes. "Absolutely not." We rarely fought. If we disagreed, it usually came down to one of us not wanting something the other did. We'd talk it out, sometimes calmly, sometimes less so, but we never let it go unresolved. I won a few arguments. She won a few. None of it ever touched what we had in private. There, we were free. If we were loud, if we played with ideas or roles, it was our world, and nothing was off limits. Some things we enjoyed, others we quietly dropped. Every single day, I loved her more. With our 10th anniversary approaching, I wanted to make it memorable. Something simple, but meaningful. I reached out to Stephanie first. "I'm thinking hotel, dinner, dancing, the works," I said. Stephanie lit up. "She'll love that. And don't worry, I won't say a word." She even got Brian in on it, and they both agreed to keep it quiet. I knew eventually I'd have to tell Clara too close to the date, and she'd feel boxed in. Too early, and she'd want to plan the entire thing herself. I told her a few days before. Her reaction was immediate and wonderful. She squealed, threw her arms around me, and I barely made it out of bed the next morning. "I can't believe you did all this," she whispered against my shoulder. "You're sneaky." Later that day, she rang Stephanie, and somehow, within hours, we were all packed and on our way. The four of us arrived at the motel, checked in, and dropped our bags in the room. "Let's not waste the night," Clara said, already touching up her lipstick. "Downstairs." Now, we headed down to the lounge area. The girls found each other almost instantly, and their conversation took off like fireworks, emotional, warm, buzzing with energy. Stephanie seemed completely enthralled with Clara. They were thick as thieves, and Clara, naturally, was already looped in on all of Stephanie's side plans. Meanwhile, Brian and I found a spot near the corner and talked golf. "We've got to defend the cup next weekend," I reminded him. "Yeah," he nodded. "Mark and Grant are just in it for the beer. They say their jobs are stressful enough without the pressure of a win," I said with a grin. He laughed. "That's what they claim. Until they lose." Eventually, we made our way to the hotel's nightclub. We found a table tucked near the rear, not far from the bar and just off the main lobby. It was a perfect spot, close enough to hear the music, but far enough that we weren't shouting into each other's ears. From there, we could rest between dances and enjoy the evening. Clara made it clear to everyone from the start she was only dancing with me. No exceptions. That was always our unspoken rule, and tonight she stated it outright. I felt proud. Her eyes were on me, her body pressed close, and for the next hour and a half, we barely left the dance floor. We took occasional breaks. She ordered wine, I stuck with water. We'd laugh, sip, and return to the music. But then something strange happened. We were dancing some slow, rhythmic number. Her head rested on my shoulder. And then, out of nowhere, I felt a hand pat my back. I turned. Some guy, dark hair, trim build, was there. Before I could ask what the hell he wanted, Clara slipped away. She was suddenly in his arms, her back to me, her hands resting easily on his shoulders like they'd done it 100 times before. I opened my mouth to say something, get off. Maybe, but the words never came. I stood there, frozen, watching her melt into his movements. She looked happy. Not casual, not polite happy. And her eyes. I'd never seen her stare at anyone like that. Not even me. He held control, leading her with quiet confidence. There was something so rehearsed about it. I couldn't move. Couldn't think. I walked slowly back to the table, still in shock. Everything inside me felt suddenly hollow. Stephanie looked up as I approached. She looked positively thrilled. Reed, she said brightly, it's great that you let Clara dance with your first love. I blinked. What? She nodded toward the floor, where Clara was still dancing with the man. She asked him to your wedding, she added, so he might claim her. But he never showed up. I stared at her. She was smiling, but it wasn't kindness behind that smile. There was scorn in her eyes, sharp and deliberate. That's not all there was to it, she said with a little shrug. My hands clenched at my sides. I felt something burning in my chest, something ugly. I could barely speak, but the words forced themselves out. What's going on? I snapped. The entire table went quiet. The others lowered their gazes. Only Stephanie kept looking at me. I shouted, louder than I meant to. This has completely destroyed my evening. My voice echoed. Heads turned. Conversations stalled around us. I pointed at her, furious. She only danced with me tonight. Stephanie, you screwed me over. You told her what? To give it time? You both knew about that jerk. What else have you planned? No one could believe how angry I was, not even me. But I couldn't stop it. I kept staring at Stephanie, waiting for her to say something that made sense, that made any of this okay. Then I felt a hand tug on my arm. Clara. She must have heard everything. Judging by the way people were glancing over, many others had too. Her expression was grave. Lips pressed together, eyes dark. My stomach sank. She spoke, her voice clipped and aggressive. Reed, the man I danced with is Bruce Bennett. I inhaled sharply. What? He's my first and only love, she said. I gasped. I didn't try to hide it. Clara continued, calm but relentless. He and I dated before I met you. We met numerous times each year. He was training to be a pediatric neurosurgeon, so we couldn't spend time together. She looked straight at me, not blinking. He was glad I found you. You're a lovely guy, Reed. Honest. Kind. I enjoyed spending time with you. But I always loved Bruce. I could barely breathe. He's the reason I can't have your kids, she added quietly. You would have been deeply hurt if I had left you and taken them with me. She looked away then, just briefly, before finishing. Bruce is now the head of Leeds Hospital's neurosurgery department. I'm traveling with him. I'm sorry you're in so much pain, Clara said, her voice trembling. But while we were together, I gave myself completely to you, so you would never know I loved anyone else. Her words pierced through me, every syllable sinking deeper. If Bruce hadn't come back for me, she continued, I would have been content to be your wife forever. I took several deep breaths. My vision blurred. My head pounded like a war drum, and my heart was racing so fast it felt like it would rip out of my chest. I looked at her, this woman I believed loved me. Really, truly loved me. And I didn't even realize it was coming until it happened. I vomited. Right there. It just exploded out of me. So much for a lovely dinner. Stephanie smiled. As the others looked at her, silent and stunned, she sat there with this knowing, venomous little grin. Meanwhile, that smug jerk Bennett was walking toward us like he owned the place. I snapped. I turned on Clara, my voice a firestorm of rage. You evil, lying, deceitful jerk. Cheater. My breath hitched. Give me your wedding and engagement rings, or I'll rip off your damn finger and take them myself. Gasps. Absolute silence. My outburst stunned the entire group. It wasn't like me, not even close, but what had just happened wasn't like anything I'd ever imagined, either. Bennett took another step forward. I turned on him, fury in my throat. Stay away, I hissed, or you'll never be able to use your hands again, loser. He froze. He clearly hadn't expected that. His eyes darted around the room, as if searching for someone to back him up. I wasn't done. You entertained my wife, I snarled, and demanded that she humiliate me. And these so-called friends? I swept my hand at the table. They're ecstatic for both of you. I spun on the rest of them, my rage no longer containable. You are all low-life sewer dwellers, I spat. For crying out loud, how many of you enjoy watching this kind of thing? How many marriages do you want to see end right in front of you? Just for fun. I shook my head, disgusted beyond words. Even the cheaters have more integrity than the lot of you. Then I turned back to Clara. My voice dropped into a low, deadly snarl. Jerk. With rings. I knew my face was contorted, veins in my temple throbbing. I had never felt anger like this in my life. I wanted to wrap my hands around her neck. I wanted her to understand viscerally how deep she had cut me. Her eyes widened. She was afraid. Really afraid. She could see it. The stranger standing in front of her wasn't Reed the husband. This was someone she didn't know, and she was in danger. With shaking hands, she took off her rings. She cried, but I didn't care anymore. I snatched them out of her palm and stormed off without a word. Rage still boiling under my skin, I burst into our room, grabbed my bag, and looked around once. Her clothes. Without hesitation, I grabbed armfuls of them, dragged them to the bathroom, and tossed them into the tub. Then I urinated on them. I didn't care. I wanted them ruined. I wanted something to feel finished. Then I headed down to the front desk. I slapped the key card onto the counter. The receptionist looked up. She's the cheater, I said, pointing behind me. She'll be paying the bill. I turned and walked off. Looking back now, I know I should have apologized for vomiting on the lobby floor. At least it wasn't on the carpet. I doubt I'll be back. That thought sat heavily in my chest as I drove home. My hands were gripping the wheel, but honestly, I don't remember anything about the drive. Not the lights, not the roads, not the turns. Just blank flashes in my mind, and somehow, the house appeared in front of me. When I walked in, I relaxed for a moment. A bitter, exhausted sort of relief washed over me. I was home. Safe. Maybe. Alone. Definitely. But calm. Not a chance. I tried to breathe. I really did. But my pulse was still hammering, and my thoughts were racing in all directions. No logic. No order, just this boiling pressure in my skull that told me I had to act. Do something. Now. I went to the garage first. Disabled the automatic door. She might have a key fob. I wasn't taking that risk. Then I grabbed a box of trash bags and went upstairs to the bedroom we had once shared. Without hesitation, I opened her closet and began pulling everything out: clothes, shoes, scarves, whatever she'd left behind. I dumped it into a pile. The sound of hangers hitting the hardwood floor felt oddly satisfying. I opened her dresser drawers and emptied them into the bags. Shoved the contents down hard to make room. That's when I saw them: 2 keys, taped neatly to the underside of one drawer. Vault key. Safety deposit box key. Of course. I moved to her jewelry box. No hesitation. I opened it and took out every piece of jewelry I had ever given her: every necklace, ring, bracelet, symbols of memories she pretended were real. I tossed the whole damn box into the trash bag. I wasn't done. I turned to the file cabinet, yanked open each drawer, and shook out every document that bore her name. Anything with her handwriting, anything connected to her gone. Paperwork fluttered down like leaves in a storm. That's when I found her password book. I flipped through it fast, scanning each line. Banking, email, utilities, travel accounts, streaming services. No sign of Bennett's name. Nothing that tied him to her there. It was almost 2 in the morning. My body begged for rest, but my mind wasn't even close. My heart had stopped its wild pounding, but only slightly. There was still fire in me. Still something driving me. The warehouse. I pulled out my laptop and searched online. There were 3 facilities in the city, all boasting 24-hour access. Perfect. One of them had an image on the homepage clear as day. They showed the type of key they issued, and it matched one of the ones I'd found. That was all I needed. I put on latex gloves, no fingerprints, and drove over in silence. Not even the radio. Just me and the hum of the tires against the pavement. When I got there and unlocked the unit, I was prepared to be angry. But not for this. What I discovered inside didn't just hurt me. It annihilated me. I had thought I knew pain. I had thought the vomiting, the screaming, the betrayal earlier that night had been the worst of it. I was wrong. This ripped something out of me I didn't even know was still alive. It shredded my soul. There was no other word for it. I stood there frozen, staring at the contents. I returned to the car, grabbed the camera I used at work, thank God it was still in my trunk, and walked back in. Every step echoed in that cold, silent space. I began photographing everything. I documented every inch. File boxes stacked in columns. 2 locked cabinets. I examined them both, picked the locks. An engineer learns that skill eventually. God help me. I almost wish I hadn't. One cabinet held Clara's plans. Plans. I stood there in stunned silence. Who the hell are you? I muttered aloud. I felt sick again. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The other cabinet? Bennett's. His files confirmed everything I had suspected. The man was soulless. Depraved. A full-blown narcissist. He didn't love her, he loved himself. That much was clear. Of course he wanted her. Of course she went back to him. My camera blinked, battery dead. Cursing under my breath, I returned to the car and dug through my bag for a spare. I grabbed the new battery, returned to the unit, and double-checked everything. I made sure I had taken all of the photos. It was already 7 o'clock in the morning when I finally finished. My body felt like it had been dragged through broken glass, but I locked the closet behind me to make sure no one would suspect I had been there. No sign, no clue, just silence left in my wake. I headed down to the cafe nearby, sat in a corner booth, and ordered breakfast. I wasn't hungry, not really, but I needed the routine, the chewing, the heat from the coffee. I stared into the cup, letting the steam blur my vision as I went over everything again in my head. Clara's parents had insisted on a prenup, of course they had. I remember the conversation now, how they couched it as a safety net just in case. I didn't think much of it at the time, but from what I'd just uncovered, Clara had never intended to go along with that. She wasn't going to sign a prenup and walk away with 10%. No, not with Bennett whispering poison in her ear. It was him. It had to be him. That smug, self-righteous loser. She didn't just want to leave me. She wanted to destroy me. Utterly. I wanted to confront her, to lay everything out and watch her squirm. But I knew better. If I told her what I'd discovered, she'd just twist it, spin some story, make herself the victim. I had to be quiet now. Careful. The song Cursive Flyer played in my head as I drove home. Fitting. Bitter. I replaced the keys I had found back to where I discovered them so she wouldn't suspect I knew anything. After that, I stopped by the hardware store. I wasn't playing around. I bought new locks for every door in the house. She didn't have the keys on her anyway, she hadn't brought her purse, but I wasn't about to take any chances. Next stop, the bank. There was a strange safe deposit box listed, one I'd never heard of. When I got there and opened it, I found it held several bonds. Her name only. Not ours. Hers. I took photos again. As I closed the box, I stared at it a long time. Where the hell did she get the money for those? Was she working as an escort on the side? Some kind of side life I had no clue about? Who was she? When I finally got home, exhausted and running on fumes, I barely had time to sit down before Clara texted me. She wrote, "I'd like to stop by and pick up my car." I stared at the screen, cold fury rising. I typed back without hesitation. "Your car? The car in question is leased in my name, and I'm the one making the payments because your salary is so meager. I'm going to take a vacation and use it until the lease expires in 8 weeks. Your clothing and belongings are already in trash bags. If you don't need them, I'll put them in the fireplace to burn. I'm going to stuff your wedding dress with straw so it looks like you're burning it." And just so she knew, the door locks and alarm codes have been changed. Do not bring that jerk in. He will not like what I'm going to do to him. A few minutes later, my phone rang. It was her sister. She went off screaming, cursing, calling me names. I didn't even listen. I ended the call mid-rant and blocked her number. I hadn't really intended to burn Clara's wedding dress. It was a provocation, and her response confirmed what I already knew. She still had feelings, twisted ones, but feelings nonetheless. Maybe guilt, maybe fear, maybe shame. Then it happened. A flash in my mind. Her Clara wearing that dress to marry Bennett. That was it. I snapped. "Screw it," I muttered. I took the dress straight to the fireplace. Didn't even hesitate. I stuffed it in, lit the match, and stood there watching it curl and blacken, flames licking at the satin like 1,000 small revenges. It had been lovely, just like the marriage. But now both were reduced to ashes. An hour passed. I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the smoke-blackened grate, when the doorbell rang. I opened it. Clara was standing there, Stephanie beside her, and behind them, Brian. Brian looked at me, his eyes cautious, but not judgmental. Then, quietly, he asked, "Reed, how are you?" I laughed, loud and sharp like Caesar when he looked into Brutus's eyes and saw the blade glinting in his friend's hand. That's what this was. A betrayal. And not just from her. I looked at all of them, Clara, Stephanie, Brian, and I couldn't stop the fury boiling out of me. "What the heck do you think this is?" I shouted. "I'm furious at all of you for covering for her, for not having the decency to tell me what you clearly knew. Most of all, I'm mad at myself for falling for that darn cheater." Clara flinched, but kept her composure. Until I called her a fool. Her eyes narrowed, her voice tightening. "Reed, I understand you're hurting, but this is so unlike you. You ruined the clothes I was planning to wear for Bruce. There was no reason for that." I stared at her. She actually said that. For Bruce. She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. "I'll get my stuff," she went on, calmer now, as if trying to regain control. "When I do, I'll leave you alone. I know I've harmed you, but I've always only loved Bruce. You'll be happier with someone who loves you, someone who has children. You're a very special person, and I truly enjoyed our time together. If I had never met Bruce, I would have been so happy with you." She paused, looking at me with that same feigned sincerity that used to melt me. "Not this time. Can I get my wedding ring back?" she asked, like it was nothing. "It'll be a lovely reminder of all the good we've accomplished together." I couldn't help it. I screamed. Oh, no way. That ring's been passed down in my family for generations. I pointed to it on her hand. My mom loved how well it fit you. We were made for one another. I have yet to tell them what a deceitful fool you are. That landed. Clara flinched. The words dug in deeper than I expected. Brian and Stephanie stayed silent, helping her load the trash bags her life into the car. Then she turned, voice trembling just enough to make it seem like she cared. What about the wedding dress? I didn't even blink. Check the fire pit. She walked over, looked down, and saw the scorched ashes, the remnants of satin and lace twisted in black curls. She covered her mouth and started to cry. Stephanie spun around and hissed, "You're such a jerk." I turned to her, voice steady but cold. "You've had her back all these years. She won't be able to wear it if she marries that darn loser. It's the ashes of my marriage. My life. Who the heck do you think you are? Jerk?" Brian didn't say anything, just stood there silent, shocked, uncomfortable. The only one of them who seemed remotely aware of how ugly this all was. When Clara finally came to her senses, she turned back and asked, "Can I check the house? See if you missed anything?" I didn't trust her, but I wasn't afraid of her either. "Go ahead." While she was upstairs, I turned to Brian. "We won't be defending any more titles," I said quietly. He nodded. A few minutes later, Clara came back down the stairs. Her voice was soft, too soft for how much pain she'd caused. "Reed, I'm sorry, but I've always loved Bruce. When you divorce me, you'll find someone who will love you the way you give love. You'll have the family you want so badly." She paused. "This hurts both of us. I really care about you," she said, voice low and smooth, like she was trying to soften the blow. "And I'm sorry I hurt you, but it's for the best." They left. I stood there, the silence around me somehow louder than their exit. Then I went inside. As I expected, she needed the two hidden keys, one from under the planter, the other from behind the gas meter. Of course she knew. Of course she'd used them. I was so damn tired, physically and emotionally drained. I collapsed into bed, my head barely touching the pillow before I passed out. It didn't last. I was startled awake by the shrill tone of my mother's voice on the phone. I hadn't even said hello before she began. "Reed, I never thought you would raise your hand against a woman," she snapped. But Clara showed us pictures of her wounds. She explained why she left you. I sat up, my jaw tight, heart pounding. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Mom," I interrupted, trying to keep control, "you've been lied to. Just like I've been lied to. For the last 13 years. She's been having fun with that jerk the entire time. She's setting me up to keep everything, to take it all, rather than lose it." I took a breath, struggling to keep my voice steady. I don't know who the heck she's become. And honestly, did I ever even know her? I have never raised my hand to any woman. You and Dad taught me better than that. Have you ever heard anyone say I raised my hand to a woman? Ever? There was silence on the other end. Even last night, I said, the bitterness thick in my throat, when I wanted so badly to wring her neck, I didn't. You can believe her, or you can believe me. But the truth will come out. And if you take her side, you'll lose me. Forever. I hung up. The battle lines were drawn. The war had begun. I left to get dinner, just to clear my head. When I returned to the house, I had what I needed, the pieces of the puzzle. Now, I needed to get organized. Follow the money, they always say in those crime shows. So I did just that. First stop, our joint account. What I discovered was interesting, very fascinating, and damning. I was damn glad I had copied Clara's password book before all this exploded. It proved essential. That evening, and well into Sunday, I spent every free minute digging, decoding, understanding. I changed all my passwords. Every single one. I wasn't taking any more chances. And the more I looked, the clearer it became. Every time she visited her sister, I was off at some tournament or vacationing with my so-called pals. But she wasn't at her sister's. No, she was with him. That jerk. She was a horrible loser. I was beyond upset. Not just with her. With myself. For being blind. For being so damn trusting. So easily played. Why didn't I notice what was going on? Why didn't I recognize her visits for what they were? Why didn't I suspect a single incident? What exactly was wrong with me? How could she have done this to me? Monday morning, I arrived at work early. I wanted to check on my annual leave and see how many hours I had banked. Sylvia from Human Resources was there early too. She always came in ahead of everyone else. She noticed I was out of sorts immediately. We had dated back in high school and grown quite close, but after we broke up, she ended the connection. She was still single last I heard, and I rarely heard about her dating anyone. She looked at me with concern and asked, "Reed, what's wrong? I've never seen you this sad." I forced an empty smile. My world had exploded Friday night. It was supposed to be our anniversary, a night meant to be romantic. But Clara had planned it so her lover would whisk her away in front of everyone. I discovered that she'd been dating and partying with him during the few free days she had. Maybe 5 to 7 a year, following 2 or 3 evenings out. 13 years I'd wasted on a cheat who loved someone else. Now, she was claiming that I controlled her, accusing me of being an outright cheater. She wanted to destroy me completely. I knew one thing. I would never lay a hand on a woman. I needed time to think, to decide what to do. Sylvia looked shocked. Without a word, she came over and hugged me. "Reed, I know you'd never strike a woman," she said softly. "Since our breakup, I've detested myself for being weak. You're such a respectable, good, and kind man. I will stand by your side regardless of what others say. Here's my phone number and email. Call me if you need help or just want to talk. There are plenty of other women you've been kind to, and they won't believe that fool's lies." I was just returning to my desk when my boss, Mr. Deckard, summoned me in. He was unhappy. "Yesterday, Clara showed up at my house with photos of you abusing her," he said stiffly. I was infuriated. "Mr. Deckard," I said, voice sharp, "you've known me for years. And you still believe a deceitful cheater? You can fire me now, or I can leave immediately. I'm doing 9.5 weeks notice, that's my time. When the truth comes out, don't expect me to return and teach your children how to do the job. They can do whatever they want with this firm. As far as I'm concerned, I'm done." I went outside, printed off my resignation letter, signed it, and placed it in the internal mail. The glances I received as I exited the workplace showed me just how startled many people were that I could be so angry. I spent the remainder of the morning figuring out exactly what I needed to do next. Clara had stayed at a hotel 3 hours away from home multiple times in the last 18 months. According to her financial records, these trips all happened while she was visiting her lying sister. It must be genetic. I packed my suitcases and hit the road. I have to add, the car was an absolute delight to drive. Maybe part of the pleasure came from knowing how irritated Clara was that I didn't give it to her. That thought made the ride even sweeter. When I pulled into the hotel parking lot, I doubted they'd grant me what I was about to ask. But what goes around, comes around. I dumped my suitcase inside the room and headed back down to the front desk. I asked to speak with the manager. The receptionist looked like she thought there was some problem with my room, but I told her everything was fine. I just had a request for the manager. The manager soon approached, and I explained what I required, knowing full well it might not be feasible. Without a court order, he was convinced they couldn't assist me. I wasn't surprised. So, I told him, the loser she'll be with is playing the same game as a woman from this town, and she's planning with me. That perked the secretary's ears. After the manager left, she leaned in and spoke quietly. "I know the couple you want to videotape. They've come here several times. He's an egotistical jerk." She continued, "I'm an old friend of the woman you mentioned. He stalks her aggressively, forcing her to sell everything for his money. I may contact the lawyer who represented her for you. She's really good. Even the sheriff trusted her, but he won because of photographs he displayed. She will get you a court order." I nodded in thanks. "I'm happy to assist your pal." If she had simply walked away with a prenup, I probably wouldn't have done anything. But they intend to wreck my life. They chose the wrong person to meddle with. 15 minutes later, I was seated in my office, chatting with Holly Morrison, a strong woman who didn't hesitate to use profanity. I laid out my predicament and everything I discovered so far. When I finished, she said emphatically, "Do you have that information on hand?" I nodded. "I have it on both my phone and camera. It's more structured and easier to track on my hotel laptop once I discovered it." She seemed quite happy. "If you can arrive tomorrow morning at 7:30, we can go over everything before heading to the courthouse at 8 o'clock, Holly said, her voice steady but full of determination. "I believe I can persuade the sheriff to issue us a warrant for the videotapes at the hotel." I nodded hopefully. Given what I'd seen, this wasn't just a one-off. That jerk frequented this group of hotels. There were at least 3 other women he'd duped with the same fraud. I wasn't sure Clara fully understood how deep she was in, but one thing was clear. I was going to fight her as hard as I could. "I'll have to hire a lawyer in my town," I said, my voice low but firm. Holly smiled, a fierce grin spreading across her face. "I'll be your lawyer if you want. And that loser? He'll crap his pants when he sees me. He'll know he's in for a tough time." I chuckled, the first real laugh I'd had since Friday night. "Awful," I said, shaking my head. I warned him I would find out the truth and ruin his life. He realized I meant it. "I will." Holly's confidence was infectious, and for the first time, I believed her. I hadn't lost faith in others as much as I thought I had. The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual, and to my astonishment, there was another man already there. Holly introduced him quickly. "This is Jim. He's the father of Betsy, the woman Bennett screwed over, and he's also the private investigator tasked with finding the remaining pieces of the puzzle." I handed Holly an SD card with all the information I'd gathered. I made sure to highlight the documents related to Betsy. Jim fell back in his chair, letting out a loud cry, anger and pain mixed in his voice. He spoke aggressively. and I realized then that the greatest thing I could do was make that jerk disappear. I had to do it. The world would be better without him. Holly and I headed to the courthouse while Jim took on the challenge of finding the other 3 women Bennett had ruined. Holly said she'd pursue Serena Wisman, the woman who, according to the documents, held the definitive proof of my innocence and that of all the victims. The question was whether Serena was involved or had been deceived by it all. Inside the court's office, Holly informed the female clerk of the purpose of her visit. I thought we were meant to meet with the sheriff. Holly went into detail, which struck me as unusual. Shouldn't she have spoken to the sheriff directly, not the clerk? After about 15 minutes, a gentleman seated at the rear of the office approached us and started talking quietly. Holly pulled out her phone. "Janine, call Betsy and tell her not to give that jerk another penny or sell her house. I'll sway the court in her favor." "Holly," I said, watching her hand me the warrant. "This includes all the hotels in the company?" She nodded, sliding the paper across the table. "You may inform Marvin that if he stalls, I'll put him in jail." Marvin, the manager, walked away without a word. I was shocked at how easily Holly's words worked. She giggled at my expression. "Sheriff Griffith is a knowledgeable elderly guy. He believes the truth is above the law. Let's head to the motel and cure Marvin," I joked, though the tension was thick. At the motel, Marvin wanted to argue, saying he needed to talk to his superiors. But Holly scared him so much that he gave in without hesitation. The chief of security was summoned, and Holly presented him with the warrant. I was thorough. I had every date Clara had booked for her sister during our time together. We watched as Marvin entered the dates and names into the system, registered as Mr. and Mrs. Bennett. Soon enough, we had video footage of them dining together and entering their room. Over time, we uncovered an additional 26 reservations at various hotels in the group. But frustratingly, we couldn't find any recording from almost 18 months ago. Holly was quite happy with the haul. I commented on a video she liked. She made some notes, and the manager promised to process and deliver all of the documents and videos to her. Back in her office, Holly began explaining her plan. "Reed, I've thought about this. We need them to initiate the divorce proceedings. If you sue her for adultery, they'll file charges and use these pictures. They'll come after us, giving us less chance to catch their lies. You told her you were going on vacation, right?" she asked. I nodded. "Take that time. Have them fill out the paperwork. They'll have to provide their evidence, which we'll destroy. Jim will retrace the other women's stories. We know Betsy's story. I'll use the video of you talking to take down this other guy for you. I'll track down Serena and find out what her role is. And I'll have my staff handle all the information and financial difficulties." I swallowed hard, trying to absorb it all. "I need a break," I admitted. "I'm not sure how I feel, but I want to break it so badly. I'll be gone for several weeks, but then I'll have to look for work. If someone's willing to hire a wife abuser, even if the accusations are unfounded." Holly gave me a sympathetic look. "You're not a star soccer player, Reed. You're better than that. Finding out that the guy was cheating on those women helped me. I wasn't the only one so easily duped. And uncovering the proof benefited both them and me. I didn't feel worthless anymore. I felt grief, exhaustion, and of course, a bloody angry rage every time I recalled that night. I stayed there for a few more nights before leaving. While in Hamilton, I drove south to Staffordshire to ride roller coasters. They say roller coasters are undoubtedly a stress reliever, and I couldn't agree more. After returning from Staffordshire, I headed north to explore the area beyond Innes. I rode the North Coast 500, then moved to the northeast for the Grampian 250. I even went on the Glenlivet Smugglers Tour and treated myself to a modern Glenlivet or two at one of the boutique shops tucked deep in the Highlands. Despite living near both mountain ranges, I'd never ventured there before. The scenery was stunning, breathtaking, really. I decided to disregard the jerks from my past for a while and just enjoy the exploration. Still, a part of me remained deeply hurt, and that emotion wouldn't leave me. Eventually, my rental car period came to an end, and I headed home. Pulling into my driveway, I was surprised at how well the lawn and garden were maintained. I had expected to see a mess. Then Gordon, my neighbor, came out when he spotted me. He smiled wide and said, "The Wanderer returns. How's it going?" I laughed lightly. "As good as it can be." He grinned knowingly. "Is this your fault?" I shook my head, smiling despite everything. "Nope." He laughed. "Sylvia called looking for you. She was concerned. Told me a bit about your problem." I was shocked. I never imagined Clara was capable of such a thing. She and Sylvia should have been actresses together. Gordon nodded. "There are a few other women involved. You've cleaned up your garden here, but I'm not sure everything survived. Some officials have been visiting you in recent days. Don't be surprised if someone knocks on your door." I thanked him. "I have some shopping to do. When I return, stop by for a few beers." "Sure thing," Gordon said, waving me off. After being away for a few weeks, I called Sylvia. We'd spoken several times per week since then, but she never mentioned the visit. When I finally brought it up, she made me talk about my feelings. She just listened quietly as I cried. I really should do something to thank her. Gordon and I were talking on the patio when the doorbell rang. I stepped outside, and a court messenger handed me the divorce papers. He smirked. I smiled back and said, "I hope the sheriff hates liars in his court." I called Holly immediately. She asked me to scan the documents and email them to her. She'd handle all the legal responses. She was delighted but refused to educate me on the details when I asked. "The less you know, the less you can unintentionally inform others," she said firmly. 7 weeks later, I found myself waiting in the courtroom for Holly's divorce hearing. Jim was there with her, looking genuinely pleased, and he gave me a quick hug as I entered the courthouse. I took a seat beside Holly and Jim, grateful to have their support. Behind me sat Sylvia, Josie, Michaela, Gordon, Bill, and a few other friends, all refusing to leave my side. My brother Dan had contacted me several times before, voicing his support, but he couldn't make it today due to work. He'd had a falling out with our parents because they'd always preferred Clara over me. That didn't surprise me in the slightest. I noticed Clara's coworkers, Stephanie and Amy, trailing behind her like shadows. Ben stood close to Clara, smirking like the complete loser he was. The moment Holly and Jim walked in, Ben visibly lost his cool. I had no doubt Jim had a strategy ready if the court refused to handle him. My folks were there too, sitting silently for Clara. I ignored their pointed stares. Clara's gaze locked onto me for a moment, but I refused to meet her eyes. Bill, sitting beside me, muttered under his breath, "Powerfully dressed fool." I chuckled quietly, knowing Bill's words weren't silent enough. I could only imagine the verbal jabs he'd received from Clara and Stephanie over the years. He seemed to take a grim sort of pleasure in winding them up. The trial began with Miss Johnston, one of Clara's attorneys, stepping forward. She was brimming with confidence. "My client seeks a prenuptial agreement limiting her to 10% of the combined assets," she announced. She admits adultery, but only after enduring cruelty throughout her marriage to Reed Barrett. She's seeking a divorce based on spousal control, with property division by court order broadly in her favor. Miss Johnston handed a set of documents, the marriage's current assets, to Holly and the court clerk, who passed them on to the sheriff. Holly couldn't stop laughing, and even the sheriff looked astonished that the two sides needed to exchange documents. Holly stood up. "My lord, Clara Barrett's actions have made mediation impossible until today. I am confident you will understand why once the proof is presented." Miss Johnston and I had a brief exchange about the evidence she planned to present. "With the court's permission, I wish to present all evidence against Mr. Barrett before re-examining the witnesses." I nodded. "I agree, provided I obtain an oath that allows me to scrutinize the witnesses thoroughly. Without that, I'll question them when they come forward." The sheriff thought it over for a few minutes. "This is highly unusual, but I understand Miss Johnston's desire to fully document your client's behavior. I will allow you to cross-examine the witnesses after Miss Johnston finishes her questioning." Holly resumed her opening speech with a calm, measured tone that cut through the courtroom air. "My client wishes to have the prenuptial agreement fully enforced and to be considered for a reduction in the plaintiff's payment as a result of her intentional lies," she said, locking eyes with the judge. These lies, in addition to attempting to avoid responsibility for her adulterous behavior, were intended to destroy his reputation, character, and future. She plotted her deceit with the purpose of ruining an honest, kind, caring man, someone very different from her. And she lives with a pair of scheming, lying charlatans. Holly paused briefly, then continued, "We are currently collecting child support from Clara Barrett because these lies cost Mr. Barrett his job. They cost him numerous friendships and even his relationship with his parents, with whom he was once extremely close. There was no spousal control, and we will demonstrate that." She sat back down, a small, confident smile playing on her lips. It was clear she had planned every word carefully. Then Clara took the stand. I felt the weight of her gaze on me, but I forced myself to look straight ahead, refusing to meet her eyes. Her attorney began the questioning. "Tell us how you and Mr. Barrett met." Clara's voice wavered as she spoke, her eyes glossy with unshed tears. She described the early days of our marriage and how I had supposedly been abusive. "Reed didn't like that I worked nights," she said softly. "I'm sure he assumed I was having fun with one of the physicians every night. His rage grew until he began striking me in the face. I covered it up with makeup while at work. I would travel to my sister's place to let the bruises heal before returning for the day's shift. He was fine until the next shift, when the cycle would begin again." My heart clenched painfully at her words, but I remained silent. "She urged me to leave him," Clara continued, "and she took photos because she said I'd need them for the divorce." The lawyer pressed, "Were you having an affair?" Clara sniffed derisively, almost like she was mocking herself. I'm embarrassed to say that I was. Bruce and I had known each other since he was a junior doctor at the hospital. I met him outside my sister's house one day. He noticed the bruises. He was kind and supportive. I realized I had deep feelings for him. We made love a few times. He helped me feel whole, not like a broken woman being harassed. The lawyer guided Clara carefully through every encounter with Bennett, the manager who had been involved in the affair, including their anniversary dinner and the outcome of that night. Clara ended by saying she wanted her wedding ring returned. I remember the moment I threatened to rip that ring right off her finger. She refused to return it to me, and my fury boiled over. I smashed Bruce's delicate surgeon's hands to pieces. I could see the fear in Clara's eyes then. She knew my past brutality and believed I might actually do it. But I kept the jewels I had given her, except for that engagement ring that was all she wanted back. Clara's voice cracked as she recalled seeing her clothes dumped in a bucket. When she returned to our room to collect her belongings, she broke down in tears, describing her stunning wedding gown reduced to ashes. Her attorney sat nearby, wearing a satisfied smile. Next up on the stand was her sister Camille, followed by Stephanie and Bennett. All of them came forward with what they called solid evidence of my poor behavior. Even though none had witnessed the incidents firsthand, they only presented the results. Camille confirmed she'd taken the photos, which made Holly beam with approval. By the time Bennett finished his presentation, it was late evening. The judge extended the deadline until the next day. As I was leaving the courthouse, Sylvia caught up with me, shaking her head. "I've never heard such a disgusting lie before," she said fiercely, pulling me into a hug. Others followed, surrounding me with quiet support. But my parents? They just glared daggers at me. I knew they'd made their choice. The next morning, Holly called Clara back to court. She was all business, no smiles, no softness. Every question felt like a sharp dart. "Clara, your maiden name is Misri. You mentioned that after your loving husband wounded you, you met Bruce Bennett, who was interning at your hospital. Was he so attracted to you that he married you? Is this story true?" Clara flushed, but nodded quietly. Holly hit play. The courtroom was filled with the recording from our earlier discussion that evening. "You have been the best spouse anyone could ask for. I will only dance with you." Holly grinned as the recording continued. "Are those the statements of a controlling wife?" Clara answered, her voice shaky. I attempted to convey that I cared, but his bullying turned me against him. Holly wasn't done. "On your 10th wedding anniversary, you dressed for your lover while simultaneously expressing your love for your husband. You did everything a loving wife would do in a loving relationship, didn't you?" Clara stammered. I tried to appease him. Holly pushed play again. There was no doubt about the actions recorded, no attempt on my part to give her pleasure. "Amazing actress portraying the lovely wife knowing you're ready to knife him in the back," Holly said firmly. "You and your longtime sweetheart have planned to disgrace Mr. Barrett," Holly continued, whose only fault was that he adored a cheater. Holly pressed another button, and the screen flickered to life with Clara's voice clear as day. "Clara, please talk," Holly said pointedly. Then Clara spoke, and my chest tightened at her words. "Reed, the man I danced with is Bruce Bennett. He is my first and only love." I gasped. The betrayal hit me like a punch. Clara continued, her voice steady. "He and I dated before I met you. We went out a couple of times each year. He was training to be a pediatric neurosurgeon, so we couldn't spend much time together. He was glad I discovered you. You were such a lovely guy, an honest and good man. I enjoyed spending time with you, but I've always loved Bruce. He's the reason I can't have your kids. You would have been deeply wounded if I had left you and taken them with me. Bruce is presently the head of the lead hospital's neurosurgery department. I'm traveling with him. I'm sorry you are in so much agony, but when we were together, I devoted myself completely to you so you would never know I loved anybody else. If Bruce hadn't come back for me, I would have been content to remain your wife forever." Holly finished, leaving me to digest the weight of her deception. The courtroom murmured, astonished looks appearing everywhere. Clara seemed caught off guard, but quickly regained her composure. I opened my mouth to speak, to smooth things over for him, but all I could think was how she had lied to me to keep her facade intact. Holly pressed another button, and a video appeared, Clara standing outside our home. Holly only grinned. "Fortunately, your husband maintains good records," she said, addressing the court. "We have the dates. You were at your sister's house in Covington on May 9th to 14th, 2019, December 26th to 31st, 2018, August 16th to 22nd, 2018, March 9th to 14th, 2018, and a number of other days leading up to your wedding." Clara responded sharply, "Yes." Holly selected another button, and suddenly videos of Clara and Bruce at various hotels on those exact dates appeared on the screens where there had been none before. The reservation forms and receipts clearly showed their presence. Holly looked at the judge. These were collected pursuant to a court order from the Hamilton Sheriff's Court. I've linked it to the documents and records I delivered to your secretary and Miss Johnston." She then turned back to Clara, who was dressed in white, her face pale. "Amazing, isn't it? Not a single bruise mark. It's as if the bruises never occurred." Holly's tone was sharp. "It appears that you, Miss Ree, and Mr. Bennett liked those hotels and frequented them whenever you reportedly visited your sister." Holly's voice cut through the courtroom like a blade. "He did not save you, Clara. You were his brownies." Clara shot Holly a fierce glare. I tried hard not to smile at the irony. Laughter suddenly erupted behind me, a sharp release of tension in the room. Holly's smile twisted, growing colder, more menacing. She pressed forward. "Now, let's take a look at the financial fantasy you offered the court. According to your agreement with Mr. Barrett, you both agreed to donate a portion of your salaries to a joint account. You wanted to keep your financial freedom, but it isn't the whole story, is it? You intended to keep your income hidden from Mr. Barrett, so you might have a backup plan in case you decided to leave him." Her eyes locked on Clara's, who now looked uneasy. "He was merely a tool for you to manipulate. You lied for years about being his wife. You have lied for years. You were a general nurse with a salary close to minimum wage. The truth is that you were, as he puts it, a cheater for Bennett." Holly's voice sharpened. "You were far ahead in your job and earned about 4 times what you told Mr. Barrett. You failed to increase your payments as agreed. You revealed your poverty only when you desired a new car and requested Mr. Barrett pay for the lease, while you drove it on your secret adulterous escapades with Mr. Bennett." She paused, her hand hovering over the next button. "You had no moral qualms about paying for some of your experiences using your joint account with Mr. Barrett. That is why the accounts you submitted to the court are fabricated." With a tap, photographs of Clara's bank statements flashed on the screen. They showed huge savings, and her current account displayed large payments from her job payments she had never told me about. Holly mocked gently. "Poor nurse who did not want to be promoted. You are actually the hospital's 3rd most senior nurse." Holly's gaze shifted, bringing up another piece of evidence. "How do you explain how these bonds ended up under your name? And what was found in your safe deposit box?" Clara looked around, shocked. I caught her reflection in the monitor. I tried to maintain indifference by not meeting her eyes directly. After a moment, Clara muttered, "I was looking out for myself when he took charge." Holly pressed on, voice dripping with accusation. "These are Miss Ree's personal information, and the bond amount was confirmed as of that date." She handed the documents to the court clerk. I noticed Miss Johnston's smile vanish instantly. Holly smiled warmly, but I knew she was gearing up for a final, delicious move. "You want to get your wedding band back after all. It's a family legacy and an unfaithful act. Wouldn't she expect to keep it? Is it for nostalgic reasons that you want to recall a decent, caring man rather than someone who would abandon you once his demands are met?" Clara's defiant voice cut through the courtroom air. "I adored that ring. It meant the world to me, especially after he burnt my wedding gown. I want it returned." Holly didn't miss a beat. She tapped a button, and a photo appeared on the screen. Bruce Bennett and Clara Ree at a hospital appointment, 9 months before the end of our relationship. The engagement ring on Clara's finger gleamed unmistakably. Holly's voice was sharp, controlled, yet dripping with irony. "The local newspaper portrays the evening admirably. Mr. Bennett relished showing off the magnificent, one-of-a-kind engagement ring he gave to his bride-to-be." She repeated the words, her tone hardening. He handed it to her. "Isn't it eerily identical to the one Mr. Barrett inadvertently gave to someone pretending to be his fiancée? Wasn't it all a charade? Convincing the hospital that Bennett was making a commitment?" Holly paused, then continued with a cruel twist. "The hospital administrator stated they like their doctors to be married because they believe having families here helps them connect with the community. So it isn't about sentimental attachment or affection. Above all, it's about getting the job you want. A physician's wife you need to completely blind the hospital administrators." Her next remark hit Clara like a dagger. "Bennett only needs you for as long as he wants to be there." I had to stifle a laugh. Holly turned to Clara directly, her voice mocking. "I'm sure you've been crying about your wedding dress. Did you intend on wearing it when or if Bennett marries you?" Clara's answer was weak, almost whispered. "No, but it sounded better." Holly shook her head. We all knew she was crying. Then, at the press of another button, Stephanie's voice filled the courtroom. "She's invited him to your wedding. She hoped he'd demand it before she married you." Clara sobbed quietly. Holly pressed on, relentless. "Mr. Barrett's main error was that he only saw you through the affection he had for you. He never saw the true you, the cruel and manipulative jerk." Holly's voice sharpened, unforgiving. "You couldn't simply walk away from such an honorable man and accept the loss. He would not have known about your indiscretions, financial trickery, or profound betrayal all those years ago." Holly's words landed heavy. "You should have delighted over his disgrace and death. You viewed Reed Barrett as a gullible fool. You saw him as a part-time worker until your love became free and wealthy enough for you. Her eyes locked on Clara's, cold and unyielding. Clearly, you envied his ability to love, so you too set out to ruin his life. Holly's voice dropped to a venomous whisper. Your ultimate cruelty was that you attempted to destroy his self-esteem and manhood so that he would never trust anyone else with his heart. Holly's final cut came with chilling precision. Even that wasn't sufficient. You wanted him so corrupted that his reputation would be ruined. Holly's voice cut through the courtroom again, sharp and relentless. He would be unable to work. He would not have a decent life. Mr. Barrett never exerted any control. Her eyes flicked to me briefly. The court may take a different view of the control you imposed on him over the years you lived with him. You denied him children. You took his money. You took his love for granted. Her tone hardened. You and your lover conspired to bring down the man who loved you, provided for you, and catered to your every desire. I felt the weight of her words, cold and damning. Holly pressed on, her voice laced with contempt. Your lover asked you to marry him, a serial cheater. I'm curious if the position you want will be available once the trial is over, and if so, how long will this last? Clara's face tightened, clearly taken aback by the suggestion. There was a pause as Miss Johnston, the judge's sister, chose not to press further questions. Bruce and Clara were preparing to leave the courtroom when Holly called out sharply, "Stop." They paused, eyes flicking toward her. Holly wasn't finished. Camille, Clara's sister, moved slowly to the podium, her expression uneasy. Holly was succinct. Do you admit to lying to the court and covering up your sister's adulterous relationship with Bruce Bennett? Camille's composure crumbled, tears welling up as she shook her head. Holly pressed on. Did you take photos of the alleged injuries? No, Camille whispered, voice trembling. Holly's tone turned cold. I will inform your church's leadership that you are a non-Christian. Camille's eyes widened in horror and fear. Then, in a burst of defiance, she spat, "Screw you, jerk." Holly called next for Stephanie. She stood rigid but tense. Holly's voice dropped, quiet but cutting. How long did you know about the affair? Stephanie's answer came steady but firm. The affair was with Reed. Clara has always belonged to Bruce. Holly smiled, a hint of mockery. Why would you lie for her? Stephanie froze for a moment, then said, I have never lied. I repeated what I had been told. Holly pressed. Have you ever seen the bruises she says she has? Stephanie responded, no. She was so upset, I believed her. Despite the relentless questioning, Stephanie refused to admit she had been an unwitting fool. She defended her friend stubbornly. But Holly, a surgeon herself, could see through the lies. Finally, Holly asked pointedly, do you know how to tell the truth? How many boyfriends have you had? Are you thinking about pulling the same trick on your husband when someone better comes along? Stephanie looked shocked. I adore my husband. I would not do that. Holly tapped a button, and a video flickered onto the screen. Stephanie and her husband, Amy Grant, leaving a room to meet Clara and Bruce. Stephanie crouched on the counter before fainting. From the gallery, Amy's voice rang out sharply, you goddamn jerk. Then she turned and walked away. Holly turned to the sheriff, her tone firm and precise. I suppose Brian and Grant would soon discover what has happened. Then she asked directly, can I request the court's leniency if I call another witness before cross-examining Bruce Bennett? Her testimony will help the court understand what is going on. The sheriff nodded in agreement. Later, Bill Bennett confided in me that Bruce seemed to have suffered a heart attack once Holly finished her speech. The courtroom fell silent as Serena Weissman stepped up to the podium. I had never seen her before, like someone straight out of a cosmetics commercial. Perfectly put together, flawless. Holly smiled. Miss Weissman, what do you do? Serena answered clearly. I'm a creative who works in theater, film, and TV. I create textural effects or use makeup to enhance experiences at events. I can make you look like street artists who create massive chalk drawings of holes in the road or trains emerging from walls. Holly's eyes locked onto her. Do you know Bruce Bennett? Serena hesitated a moment before responding cautiously. Yes. I met him while visiting Bristol. My son Alan was diagnosed with a benign brain tumor, and Mr. Bennett operated on him. It was a success. That was 8 years ago. Holly pressed further. How did Mr. Bennett find out about your abilities? Serena explained clearly. After the surgery, Alan's motor skills were temporarily impaired. I helped him regain use of his arm and hand. We were playing with plasticine, sculpting his favorite monsters, when Mr. Bennett arrived. We spoke, and he seemed fascinated. Holly's voice was steady. Was it no further than that? No, Serena replied. It was approaching Halloween, and he asked if I could dress him up for the party. He wanted to be an abusive spouse because his friend said he was so tense he'd never heard a joke. His reputation, he claimed, was undeserved. He said he wouldn't tolerate a woman saying no to him, let alone asserting superiority over him. It would reveal all that they were. I could almost see the courtroom absorbing the weight of that confession. Serena went on, I made him up for 3 parties that year. The bruises were slightly different colors. I've done it 3 more times since then, several years apart. Holly nodded thoughtfully and asked, also, Mr. Bennett, do you know anyone else in this court? Serena glanced around and answered, Clara and Serena. I did their makeup for a few parties in Liverpool last year. They claimed their husbands would never have hit them, but they wanted to see how their friends would react. Holly pressed a button, and images of Clara and Serena appeared on the screen. I sat there, barely able to contain the bitter satisfaction twisting inside me as Holly laid it all out. The images on the screen, those pictures of Clara and Serena, weren't bruises inflicted by any man. They were Serena's artistry, her talent for creating illusions. I knew that before Holly even explained it, but hearing it made it all the more real. They must have been Serena's copies, Holly said, her voice calm but cutting through the courtroom like a blade. They demonstrate the entire process. There were no visible marks on either of them before she began or after she finished. I wanted to laugh aloud. I'd hit Clara? No, it was all a ruse. Serena's makeup was phenomenally talented. I nearly jumped with joy when Holly confirmed the photos were the same ones Serena had shown the court. Holly stammered, trying to find her words. So all of those photos show the work you did and no actual bruises? Serena nodded without hesitation. When they arrived, they were spotless. When they left, they appeared battered. Then Holly asked plainly, if you knew what your creations would be used for to discredit and accuse their husbands of assault, and Bennett to sue the women who turned down his advances, would you have allowed it? Serena looked shocked, her voice trembling. I would never do something like that. If I had known, I would have contacted them and offered to reveal the truth. Holly nodded. Thank you. Miss Johnston said nothing, her face pale and defeated. The sheriff hummed quietly, as if relieved the case was finally coming to an end. But Holly wasn't done. When Bennett took the stand, 2 men entered the courtroom, their eyes fixed solely on him. Bennett's expression hardened. He did not look pleased. I stared at him, my cruel smile betraying how much I was looking forward to Holly tearing him apart. Holly began, voice sharp and unyielding. Mr. Bennett, you had an extramarital affair with Miss Rhee. Did you know she was previously married to Mr. Barrett? Bennett, arrogant as ever, sneered, no. I only came to her rescue. I shuddered at his self-love. He always had to make it about himself, bragging even in the worst moments. Holly pressed on, picking apart every lie. You claim to have gotten intimate with Miss Rhee, who had only recently recovered from an assault by her husband. Yet today, I presented the court with decades of evidence of you spending time together in hotels for multi-day meetings. She paused for effect. She laughed when you tried to make love to her. Bennett snapped back angrily. No, we've only recently become intimate. Holly was relentless. Many hotel guests complained about the noise from your room. Your mouth screamed as you exchanged intimate moments. Are your hotel neighbors lying? Bennett stared at her in silence as she rattled off the numerous complaints. Then she smiled, a cold, hard smile. There are additional complaints about your behavior. I watched Holly, cold and calculated, as she began to wrap up her relentless assault on Bennett. The tension in the courtroom was electric, every eye fixed on the man who had tried so hard to ruin me. You lied to conceal your affair with a married woman, Holly said, her voice sharp and unyielding. You deceive your employers by claiming that everything we just witnessed is fiction. Are you a real surgeon, or is this another scam? Bennett's face twisted with anger. I am a surgeon, one of the best. Holly laughed, a low, bitter sound. You may be a talented surgeon, but as a human being, you are despicable. She pressed a button, and the screen behind her lit up with picture snapshots of Bennett's so-called marital bad attitude. She stopped on one and let the court absorb the accompanying letters that showed how he had conned 4 different courts into awarding him large monetary settlements against women like Betsy, whom he'd actually befriended. From his own records, it was clear that those women all denied assaulting him. The whole thing was a twisted retaliation for their daring to reject his advances. He had used these photos and his manipulations to convince even the sheriff that he was the victim, despite the mountain of evidence against him. Holly pressed him about the photos. He stumbled, unable to answer some of the incriminating statements. She tore the covers off his lies, recounting his abuse and manipulation of these women. Your colleagues were right about you, weren't they? You cannot see a woman as an equal, capable of refusing your pathetic advances, she said coldly. Those who refused and had property you persecuted. You lied in court. You are simply a small man in every sense of the word. Bennett, indignant, snapped, you're just a bloody witch. The sheriff's eyes flicked to Holly, and I almost laughed. The arrogance that had once made Bennett so unbearable was slipping away, replaced by dawning fear as he realized the trap closing around him. After shredding him over his mistreatment of women, Holly moved on to the main course, her eyes steely as she brought up records of his encounters with Clara, their emails, their written correspondence. He tried to dispute that they had been in contact at all during that time. When Holly displayed the comprehensive plot they'd cooked up to accuse me of attacking Clara, sobs broke out in the gallery. Bennett's strategy was clear: destroy me. He tried to dismiss it, calling it lover stories, a distraction, insisting they'd never go through with it. That is exactly what you were doing, Holly said. You played his parents. You played his boss. You fooled Miss Johnston into presenting this before this particular court. She continued to reveal more documents, turning to face Bennett directly. You weren't going to stop there, right? You were already planning another scheme to get the money? Bennett denied it, but the growing anxiety was plain on his face. He glanced nervously at the two men who had entered earlier, and then at Clara. Holly hesitated for a moment, as if savoring the moment before dessert, then pressed a few more buttons. The courtroom let out a collective, heavy sigh. The moment the screen lit up with Bennett's detailed plan to sue Clara for all her money, I could hear the unmistakable sound of her voice sobbing, broken, crushed by the weight of betrayal. It was like hearing a nightmare played out in real time. The plan was chilling. Bennett, tired of Clara, was scheming to marry her to secure his grip as head neurosurgeon. In 3 or 4 years, he'd learn the ropes, move to the United States, and rake in millions. Then, when he grew bored or fed up, he'd orchestrate her downfall, forcing her to commit adultery, so he could claim everything. I could almost feel the sting of those tears as Clara's dream unraveled. Her reputation shattered beyond repair. It was a betrayal so cold it made my blood run cold. Holly leaned forward, eyes locked on Bennett. You lied in this courtroom. You lied in other courts to receive a cash award. I believe you will find that the courts will not be kind to you. Sheriff Griffiths of Hamilton had already issued a warrant for his arrest. The officers standing nearby were here to enforce it on behalf of the women he had wronged. Holly had secured a court order to freeze all his assets, which had been implemented that very morning. She glanced at Miss Rhee, who was watching silently. I'm sure you now realize the difference between what you so readily discarded and a con man who will go to any length to swindle naive ladies, all to compensate for his own inadequacies. Bennett was stunned, his bravado finally drained as the officers led him away in handcuffs. Then Holly called me to the stand. She told my story, the truth about my marriage, how completely unprepared I was for the storm that had hit. She spoke of that terrible evening in detail. I admitted how, overwhelmed, I'd emptied my bladder and thrown it away, a small but telling sign of how badly things had gone. I spoke about the horror, the false accusations of abuse that had stripped me of my parents, my work, my friends. The damage to my life was irreparable. Despite being recognized as a capable engineer, no one wanted to hire me. I had lost everything I valued. The sheriff finally spoke, his voice calm but resolute. I will make a decision on the partition of property tomorrow. Then, turning directly to me, he said something I hadn't dared to hope for. Mr. Barrett, you have been completely vindicated and have averted a major miscarriage of justice. You are the decent, honest, and compassionate individual that your attorney mentioned in the beginning. You deserve to meet someone who is similar to you and have a successful future. He finished abruptly, eyes flicking toward the back of the courtroom. Those who have lied I'll deal with tomorrow in my courtroom. Jim embraced Holly tightly. It was a long, silent hug that said everything words couldn't. Then he came over to me and pulled me into his arms. Bill, Sylvia, and the others followed, surrounding me in a warmth I hadn't felt in so long. I could hardly breathe, overwhelmed with emotion. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my mother. She was crying. Not tears of joy, at least, not entirely. There was grief etched into her face. She had lost both her daughter and her son in different ways. Ever since Dan's cruel words and the fallout that followed, her visits to see the grandchildren had become few and far between. I could feel the pain in her silence. The next day, the sheriff annulled the marriage. He ruled clearly and decisively. I was awarded my rightful share under the prenuptial agreement. He further ordered Clara to repay the amount she was supposed to contribute to our joint account, as well as the money she withdrew from it to fund her affair. The car she'd kept, something she could well afford, was included in the calculation. The bonds, he said, were valued at £125,000. From that, he awarded me £12,500. Then, as a form of relief for the damage done, he granted me monthly maintenance £675 until I found a job that matched the salary I had lost due to her lies. Holly's team handed in all the relevant documentation. Everything was airtight. It was included in the court's paperwork, detailing each betrayal with facts no one could argue. Clara looked almost like her old self, worn, ashamed, defeated. But the guilt was unmistakable. Serena, beside her, could hardly hide her tears. The sheriff didn't hold back. He addressed Clara directly. You should know, he said firmly, if this trial had gone your way, I would have seriously considered sending you to prison for perjury. He paused, eyeing her closely. The truth eventually came out. But if I ever see a similar case and find that kind of dishonesty again, I will not hesitate. You'd be serving several years. He fined her £5,000 on the spot and issued a 3-month suspended prison sentence. Then came the financial consequences. She was ordered to pay my legal fees in full within a single month. If she failed, the suspended sentence would be enforced without further warning. Camille and Serena didn't escape unscathed. Each of them was fined £1,000, also due within 30 days. Meanwhile, Bennett had been brought before the Hamilton Sheriff Court. Later, Sheriff Griffiths had a private sit-down with him over coffee, no less. I could only imagine what was said behind those doors. Back in our circle, Holly, Jim, and I sat down to talk. Now that this part of the nightmare was over, the question was, what next? Holly didn't hesitate. I'm going to the General Medical Council, she said. I'll be pushing for Bennett to be removed from the medical register. He has no business practicing medicine after what he's done. As we were talking, Jim's phone rang. He answered, listened for a moment, and then turned to us. That was Hamilton Court, he said. Bennett's been taken back into custody. Apparently, Sheriff Griffiths wasn't finished. He had made it clear to Bennett's defense team. The next time Bennett appeared in court, he was to have all the money he took from those 4 women deposited into the court's account. If not, he'd be looking at a significant prison sentence. Griffiths also planned to request full payment of court fees and any other justified expenses caused by Bennett's false allegations. Even if those payments were made, Bennett would still be facing a long prison term. Holly wasn't done either. She had one more target. I'm filing an appeal with the General Board of Nursing, she said, her voice steady. Clara's conduct what she's done in such a prominent position. She understood she was likely to fail. Unlike Bennett, Clara hadn't taken control of her situation. She didn't own what she did. She didn't try to clean up the damage only to minimize the consequences for herself. But with the complaint Holly was filing, there'd be a permanent mark. Any company that looked her up would think twice before hiring her. That was something. As for me, I'd be looking for work. Not just because of financial need, but because I didn't want anything to do with Clara. No association, no overlap, no shadow of her name following me around. Holly, always the voice of reason, sat beside me with a soft firmness in her tone. You're going to have to put up with the child support for now, she said, just until you find something. Let the legal end rest a bit. Your next steps matter more. Jim surprised me, completely caught me off guard. He spoke up quietly. Stay with Sylvia for a while, he said. Somehow, she appears to like you. I blinked. Sylvia? He nodded. Yeah, when I talk to her, she seems friendly and compassionate, especially about you. Maybe you two can help each other. He glanced at me, then added, she did say she can't be what you want, though. Whatever that means. I said nothing, trying to make sense of that. Then Jim leaned forward, his voice lower, more serious. Look, given what you've gone through, I'll say this once: go talk to a counselor. Despite your calm demeanor, you're in a great deal of discomfort. You're not deceiving us. I looked down at the floor. He continued, a counselor will help you rediscover yourself. Live life again. Find happiness. You deserve it, Reed. I nodded, a little overwhelmed. I wasn't used to this kind of direct kindness from Jim. He and Holly had always been practical, almost clinical in their care, but this was something else. Holly smiled gently. You know, she said, Jim and I have seen a lot over the years. But your story? She chuckled. There are books and movies that could be made about your experience. That made me smile. You're a good, respectable, honorable man, she added. Help me get them back, give them the stability they need. And, well, screw them up even more by giving them a decent life. Her tone was light, but the meaning was clear. Healing was the best revenge. As we stood up to leave, she gave me one final smirk. And if you believe the sheriff let Clara off easily by not jailing her, he didn't. That made me laugh. A real one. Holly continued, my bill's going to be around £24,000. Your rate will be significantly reduced. For you, I've been so helpful to Betsy, but she'll never know. That brought a smile to my face. Holly, sharp as ever. Later that evening, Dan dropped by after work. He looked tired, exhausted, really. The new baby wasn't sleeping well. He mentioned they'd gone for a third because he'd wanted a son. And now, finally, they had one. Our parents haven't even met him yet, he said, rubbing his eyes. He looked at me for a long moment, and then said, you know, there's a night shift opening at my place. I shook my head gently. Thanks, Dan, but I have next to no experience in that industry. He smiled and wrapped an arm around my shoulder. You'll find the right person. You'll get the family you want. Then he chuckled. At least till the first contaminated diaper. We both laughed, and then he slipped out the door, back to the madness of his growing household. Later that night, Sylvia, Josie, Michaela, Gordon, Bill, and a few others met me for a celebratory drink. The laughter, the clink of glasses, the relaxed atmosphere, it felt good. Really good. I hadn't had fun in a long time. And then Josie shocked me. She smiled wide and walked up to me. "Come on, Reed," she said. "Dance with me." I hesitated, but she didn't wait, just grinned and pulled me in close. "Take a chance." She leaned up and whispered, "Sylvia's always cared about you. You'd complement each other really well." Then, with a mischievous glint in her eye, she giggled. "If not, Michaela or I will snag you." She attempted to waddle away dramatically, pretending as if I had just stepped on her foot. Sylvia was the last to leave that night. She stood quietly near the door for a moment, then turned to me. "Reed," she said softly, "I promised that if you ever needed anything, I would help you. I still mean that." I could see the sadness in her eyes. The sincerity. "I wish I were the lady you needed," she continued. Then Michaela, Josie, and the others, they would have been thrilled to see us close. Friends, or maybe more. She paused. "You're too fine a man to be alone." I looked at her, really looked at her. Sylvia had always had a quiet strength, even when I was too immature to recognize it. "I saw how you behaved when people brought their kids to work," she said. "You're going to be a wonderful father someday." There was something bittersweet in her smile. "Do whatever you have to do to find love," she said. I swallowed hard. Then I stepped forward. "Sylvia," I said, "I believe we can support each other." Back then, I was too young, I didn't know myself. I didn't know how much a woman could mean. How much someone could support you. You were dear to me. You were my first love. A crush, maybe, but real. I glanced away, feeling the heat in my face. "Jim suggested I see a counselor," I continued, "to help me figure myself out. Maybe we could both go. Together. If he can help us both." I trailed off. There's a void in me. I don't know who I am. Sylvia didn't hesitate. She smiled faintly and said, "Reed, if we do this, it's only because I hope to be with you. As a partner. As a mother someday." She exhaled slowly. "You deserve it." Then she looked me in the eye. "Let's try. Let's see a counselor." 2 days later, I picked up the local newspaper, and there I was right on the front page. The article was thorough. It laid out the entire scheme, how they tried to set me up. It left little room for doubt. People saw through it. The online comments alone stunned me. Nobody supported her. And some of the things people said they hoped would happen to her, well, they scared me, honestly. 8 weeks passed. I was beginning to breathe a little easier when Holly emailed me. Attached were her letters, one to the General Medical Council, another to the General Board of Nursing, and a third to the Evangelical Church leadership. She hadn't forgotten Bennett. She made sure of that. His behavior, his courtroom lies, and the disgrace he'd brought upon his profession, she laid it all out. She called for his medical registration to be suspended immediately, and it worked. By the time he reached his third court appearance, even though he had repaid the nearly £250,000 he swindled from those women, Sheriff Griffiths gave him 5 years. Holly also provided Serena Weissman's photos of him, hard, irrefutable evidence. The fiscal prosecutor made sure Bennett's defense team had the material before they left court on day 1 of his plea. He pled guilty at the first opportunity, so he qualified for a 1/3 sentence reduction. But Sheriff Griffith wasn't interested in leniency. He cited a precedent from the Court of Appeal. He said if it had been up to the High Court, Bennett would have received 7.5 years, easy. Griffith said the 5 years he issued were fair, but he considered bumping it to the High Court anyway, just to get a harsher sentence. Ultimately, he decided not to, because of the COVID backlog. In other words, he said plainly in court, "You appeal at your own peril." Bennett, once a top-tier medical expert, was now disgraced. He'd spoken publicly before. Now, that record worked against him. Major publications ran with the story. The Sunday editions destroyed him. I got approached by a few reporters, but I declined to comment. "I'm still too close to it," I told them. Still too far removed from her treachery to say anything. Holly's letter to the Evangelical Church was direct. She questioned Camille's credibility and moral standing. She pointed out how Camille lied under oath with her hand on a Bible. Holly was blunt. Camille had broken one of the core commandments of the very faith that underpinned her role in the church. That alone, she argued, should bar her from advancement in their hierarchy. I didn't see how her marriage would last. Her husband had always been devout, passionate about God, integrity, all of it. Meanwhile, at the golf club, word was spreading. Brian and Stephanie had split. Amy and Grant were struggling. Sarah and Mark were having issues. His jealousy over her closeness to the others was eating him up. When I swung, my kick sailed at least 15 yards longer, especially when I imagined the ball belonged to one of those benches. I didn't care about Clara anymore. She'd rolled me right to the edge of despair, then turned around and let her knight in rusted armor roll her even further. Karma is a jerk. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.